Family is always everything, and for Dame Pearlette, it is no exception.
It was an extremely proud moment for all of us. When she finally made the decision and she told, the family, everybody was just so excited and, elated about the entire thing. And she remained the same person that we know. She remained a humble individual. I remember when she first went into Government House, because of the relationship that she and my mom shared, we often visited her at Government House because she lived alone at Government House. So, we went to visit her to maintain the bonds and so on. And her friends also would visit. And I remember her saying, "Boy, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this protocol thing. I don't know," because she loves to laugh, she loves to have fun, she loves to sing, she loves to dance. And so initially, that was one of the things, that she often spoke about and kind of joked about. How am I going to deal with this protocol thing? But she did very well. And as a matter of fact, she's taught all of us protocol. All of us in the mix have learned it, because as family, she wanted us to live up to a particular standard, that if they're guests and so on, that we're not the ones who's fumbling. So she taught us protocol, along with her ADC and everybody else who was around her. So it really was an interesting time for us.
There was a feeling in some circles that Dame Pearlette's demit from office was hurried, or maybe forced?
I wouldn't say forced. I have to admit, in 2017, I had not planned to demit office, but I was asked to consider demitting, and it is the prerogative of the government to decide who serves as head of state. I was asked to demit, and but there were some administrative, arrangements to be made to reconcile some bits of legislation, and that took a while. And by the time that was resolved, I was given a date by which I should demit, and it was hurried. I mean, within a month. So I demitted office on the 31st of December. That date was given. I mean, I had spent 20 years, and while I have to admit that I perhaps had felt comfortable, spending a few more years, but that's what the Constitution is. It is that the Queen appoints on the advice of the Prime Minister. It is the prerogative of the Prime Minister and the administration in power. So I didn't have any. I mean, it wasn't wrong. Once things were put in place as it should be, I demitted office on the date that had been assigned.
Having served 4 prime ministers, Dame Pearlette expounds on her relationship with them all.
With Dr. Anthony, well, he's the one who nominated me as. So we had a very good relationship, and he helped me along, until I got my feet, firmly on the ground. So he would, as the Constitution requires, he would visit quite regularly. So in fact, every Monday, if I recall, on his way down.
A Prime Minister is supposed to keep the head of state informed of the work of the government, the activities of the government. And I know former Prime Ministers who did not take this seriously, but I did. And you have to remember that the Governor General also received cabinet conclusions, all the documents. And therefore, having received cabinet documents, cabinet conclusions, she was put into a position to be aware of the decisions of the government. You must never forget, too, that the Governor General had certain executive functions. So, for example, there were certain appointments, certain classes of appointment that required her approval, albeit, of course, on the advice of the Prime Minister or other authority. So she had to be kept informed. And I chose to visit her every Monday morning because cabinet meetings were scheduled for the Monday. So I would leave my house here, of course, then travel up to Government House, hopefully an hour and a half before. Sometimes I was late, mind you, because of all kinds of things. And then we'd sit and chat for an hour, 45 minutes. Now, basically, on those occasions, if there were issues on my side that I had to inform her about, I would do so. But there were also issues that she wanted clarifications on, which I would then provide. Now, you also have to bear in mind, Dave, that the Governor General is in a very special and very peculiar position. That's why you have to be so careful who's appointed to the post. Because really, a Governor General is also a sounding board, not just an executive functionary. And for her to be a sounding board to her government, it means that she has to be someone who can maintain contact with the society at large, with all sections of the society. And there are many persons throughout the length and breadth of the country who prefer to trust the Governor General far more than they would trust the Prime Minister or the Minister. There was one other aspect about her tenure that I really enjoyed. We both liked gardening. We both liked flowers. So I took keen interest in what she was doing around Government House because she brought it back to life. She really did a wonderful, wonderful job. And if there were overwhelming issues confronting the country, I would take the opportunity to discuss the issues with her and to share points of view. She was a great source of advice. I made a point earlier that she was exceedingly meticulous. Unlike a lot of other Governor Generals, when documentation reached her at Government House, she would go through it very meticulously and often point out errors and mistakes to civil servants who did not always take kindly to being corrected, especially permanent secretaries. But she was a perfect teacher.
With Sir John, it was a short stint, but you know, a lot of people were in awe of Sir John. So he looked to me quite stern. So I would communicate with him by letter. I mean, I never sat. I mean, apart from swearing him as Prime Minister. In fact, and I have to admit, some of my friends were, you know, quite anxious about my future when the results came out. And I thought, well, what will be will be. But at his swearing, he did say that he has no intentions of playing political football with the opposition. And so we worked well, as I say, for the few months he spent in office. And anytime I had to communicate with him, it was very formal. I would communicate by letter. So, but we never, sat down face to face to talk, and So that was him.
I was not surprised when the UWP retained Dame Pearlette because the truth is she had executed her duties fearlessly. She was independent and she had emerged untarnished by partisan politics, so that you really could not identify where she stood politically, whether she was red or she was yellow. I mean, you know as well as I do, there were a lot of commentary on the color of the dresses she wore when she delivered the throne speeches at the opening of every new session of Parliament. And persons will discuss whether the dress was too yellow to signify a commitment to one side, or whether the dresses had too many tones of red to suggest another commitment on the other side. So the discussions were legendary. And I think it was testimony to the fact that she was very independent in her approach. She was fearless, and she attempted to be as balanced as could be in all the circumstances that presented, themselves to her.
Stephenson King was easygoing, but you know, Honorable Stevenson King would tell you, yes, Your Excellency, you'll see me, I'll be coming. And then he would be waylaid, you know, by somebody here and somebody there. But on a few occasions, when things were looking a bit tense, you know, on a few occasions I summoned him, you know, to Government House to give me, you know, a feel of what was happening out there. I mean, you heard things, you know, things in the public domain, but, you know, I wasn't quite sure what was going on. Yes. Yeah. So I thought at some point that, you know, let me just not sit it out. Let me invite him in, and I asked him to come in. And, you know, he updated me on what was happening as far as he knew anyway. And then with Honorable Alan Chasney, yes, again it was, you know, for about a few months. I mean, I don't know. I suppose I can't say that. I saw him more often when he was leader of the opposition than when he became prime minister, because he would come in and call me and ask, could he come in and, you know, as leader. Well, he wasn't leader of the opposition. Sorry, he was leader of the party. You know, and would come in to tell me, you know, what was happening, what were his plans, and so. And spend, you know, hours talking. But I suppose by the time you get, you have the reins of office, you know, you think you probably have less time, and you think, you know, differently.
The grounds at Dame Pearlette's home are immaculately manicured and maintained, and we took the opportunity to mention how exquisite the grounds at Government House were during her tenure 1997 to 2017.
I have to admit, when I came, I found the gardeners. There were the 4 gardeners, and, you know, and I used to say to them, you know, the idea is to keep the lawn, the grass, you mow the lawn. It's not a question of cutting grass, you know, because before that, I have to admit, I don't think they had the equipment and so that they needed. They had cutlasses, so they cut the grass, you know. But when I came in, I said, you know, it's got to mow the lawn. So, you know, you got from your funds to buy a lawn mower, to buy a weed eater, to buy a blower. You know, a cutlass won't cut it. You see what I mean? And I mean, I would go out there every morning before I go to office. I would go down and have a chat with them, with the gardening crew, and find out what it is they're doing. And sometimes it took them a while to get around to doing things the way I wanted to do it. But I would do my bit on an evening. If there was anything that needed pruning, I mean, I would prune or weed. And I would leave the cuttings just where it fell. I wouldn't clean it. Next morning, they would come in and say, this lady doesn't sleep or what? So they, after a while, they got to understand and to appreciate. And they used to feel quite happy when people, you know, commended them, you know, on the way they kept it, you know. But it was a joint effort. I mean, I would be out there with them, you know, when I say put the thing to, you know, 2 feet apart, they would sort of try to decide what 2 feet is, and by the time they got to the end, it wasn't 2 feet. I said, you know, y'all don't have straight eyes. You know, get a piece of stick, you know. So I would be there with them, and they appreciated it, and they enjoyed it so I did that on mornings, and maybe a little afternoons after lunch before I returned to the office. I would, you know, take a little walk around and see what they're doing and have a chat. And, you know, so that was the relationship I had with them. So they would say, if they knew something was not up to scratch, they would say to one another, I hope Mom don't see that, you know, and would quickly, you know, put it right. So that was the relationship I had with my groundsmen.
Dame Pearlette speaks about the wonderful architecture.
Somebody described it as eclectic. Because it wasn't just Victorian, or there were different elements. When I did try, to get the actual, style from one or two historians, but they couldn't quite pin it down. So they described it as an eclectic style. Yes. But it took quite a bit to keep it, looking decent. I was always concerned at the fact that when there was work to be done at Government House, they didn't appreciate the house, the nature of the house, the fabric, the historic, significance and value of the house. So when you said there's something to be done, they would send me somebody who would ask me where to put this nail, and I said, but if you need somebody who knows about those buildings and could really take care of it. So that is one of the things I was quite sort of concerned about, and was always complaining that there was not enough attention given to the maintenance and upkeep of the physical plant. I did what I could with the furnishings on the inside, put a little touch of homeliness in it. And as I told people, I had pictures everywhere on cushions, and I said, but I live there. It has to be a home. It's not a sterile place that people just come and be, stiff. But the outside, and and I was surprised that there was no maintenance schedule for the building. And I remember when I first came, and I had just come from Sir Arthur, and I in fact had a maintenance schedule program for the division. So I knew all about maintenance schedule. So I came, and said, but what about a maintenance schedule? They look at me and said, but we have defect sheets, Your Excellency. I said, the defect sheet is only when there is a defect. You give me the sheet and I say, the termites have eaten this, and and it took them a while. I don't think they ever, appreciated it. I have to admit, though, that just before I came, that section of Ministry of Public Works that did maintenance had been disbanded. So every time you wanted something, it was finding a tradesman here or a tradesman there. So that may have been the cause.
Dame Pearlette talks about delivering the annual throne speech in both English and Creole, Lang Mamanu.
In fact, it was a request from Dr. Anthony, who my first throne speech asked me to, consider doing, part of it in Creole, so that the Creolophones, the people who spoke mainly Creole, could feel that they were part of the governance of the country. They would understand, what was happening and be part of it instead of, just hearing it. Or they might understand a few things in English, but not really feel that you were including them. It was, that it didn't feel, you wanted it to be inclusive, But of course, throne speeches are kind of so long, so that if you had to do, I therefore couldn't translate, the whole thing. So I would read it and then pull out, the main issues, and then, deliver these main issues in Creole. And not only the general public, but even the parliamentarians, while I'm delivering it, and I would look at the expression, and you could see when I'm speaking in English, when I'm delivering the bit in English, some of them would be, and you wonder if they're listening really. And then when I stopped, and the moment I said, Monsieur President, Monsieur Speaker, everybody, you know, they sit up straight and, you know, and then I hang on every word, you know. And I tried, you know, not to, I mean, you know, Creole is a very full of imagery and, you know, so I would look for the expressions that, you know, the Creole expressions that would give us the sense of what the English was trying to say. And so, you know, so there were proverbs and you know, neologisms and, you know, and people, and afterwards they stopped me and said, I haven't heard that word for a long time. What is it? And what does that word mean? And, you know, so I knew that they were, you know, that they enjoyed it. And members of the public too afterwards. I mean, people remember the Governor General for two things. Not for two things, but the two main things I think I'm remembered for is the Creole and my hats.
Indeed.
You know, but I was happy, you know, that because the whole idea, as I saw my role as head of state, was to bring, you know, inclusiveness in the country, to bring the people together, to get them to see that they are part, you know, of a community, you know, albeit on the national scale, and the use of the Creole, you know, I think went a long way to get that sense of belonging. Si nous moutoué yon à l'autre respect, côté nous ka travail, côté nous ka fréquenter pour faire business, et bien pour amuser con nous. Eh bien, dans ces machines-là, nous avons voyagé, nous avons descendu. Nous avons bâti qualité société, nous brisons pour réussir comme une nation responsable.